right, welcome to the Resume Rumble. Today we are working on service and quality professional. A few good things in here that we can definitely use. What I typically do in these situations is map it out first. What am I going to focus on regarding the achievements, right? Because the most successful resumes are achievement-based, where we show a clear cause and effect, right? Where we say, I did this, which resulted in that, or here's the result, here's how we got there. But we're going to work on this very helpful volunteer for today's project, and let's dive into it. So, starting off with the current job title. So, she's going to be targeting something in service and quality. However, title's currently Senior Technical Specialist. So, because we want the resume to be customizable, perfectly fine to have her current title, and then we would shift it. So let's say she was looking for a quality manager. I can type today. Quality manager role. I would then put the word profile next to it. That word profile signals to the hiring manager that while this person's never had this exact job, this document is the profile of somebody who's done this role, has the background and achievements to back it up. So never be afraid to adjust the title that way. Below, I should say, we want to include her thesis statement, basically. What are those key elements that she's bringing to an organization? So as we can see in her current document, talking a lot about process improvements, customer success, quality management. So again, if we're focusing on service and quality, I'm probably not going to focus as much on copy editing or customer success, schedule development, maintenance, maybe. So let's start building this out. So quality management, yes. Process improvement, she's making the organization run better. Continuous internal process improvement. That's not necessarily a keyword somebody might look for. However, continuous improvement is. So that's something I would love to get right up front and center. And then whenever we're talking about something related to quality, it's gonna be typically in a pretty regulated environment. So being able to say regulatory compliance, very important in there. Knowing the regulations, rules, laws that go into what she's doing. So that gives us a good place to start. Now, let's talk about the summary. So within the summary, I want to do a few jobs. I want to tell this person's story in an engaging, articulate way. I want to give her plenty of opportunity to adjust the document, depending on how she wants to describe herself, the things that she does, the soft skills that she puts into play. So what we'll do here is I'm going to talk you through it. So again, this is all meant to be a baseline because we customize the resume for every role. However, we want to give ourselves a good place to start. So if we're talking about quality, this person has to be very meticulous, be very orderly with what they do, so process-oriented, professional, with how much experience does she have? 15 plus years of success, maintaining highest levels of quality. So reason why I wouldn't say maintaining the highest levels of quality, typically, and this is my approach, not the end all be all, but typically what we want to do is get rid of any articles, pronouns, stuff like that, just to keep the document punchy, and it saves us some real estate in the end. So that's why we don't include those. Maintaining highest levels of quality in a variety of sectors, because as you can see, she's been at the medical device field, entertainment, video games, healthcare. So comfortable saying that. But as we mentioned before, heavily regulated industries. And how does she do this? She does this by engaging with stakeholders, so what I'm looking for is what are these core elements of what she's done throughout her career, and one of those looks to be working, pretty heavily with cross-functional teams. Like, she's not in a silo. She's working with a lot of different departments, stuff like that. So engaging with stakeholders, aligning cross-functional teams. You could also say collaborated with if you want, and implementing process improvements. So, not in love with the widowed line. That's something I never want to have. So what I can do is get rid of and that gets us back up. So nice and neat. Now, let's just say I didn't want to take that out, or I couldn't. What I could do is highlight the whole line, hit Command D or Control D. I go to spacing, and I can squeeze it, and then we're back up in good shape. Now, the most I would do if I'm using, that's called kerning. You can't do that on Google Docs, but you can do it on Word. The most I would go is 0.4, but even then, that's really squeezed together. Basically, it just tightens up the space in between the letters. So, most, like I said, I would go as 0.4, but, you kind of play with it and see what works. So, let's put that back. Brilliant. Now, second part, I'm usually trying to talk about communication and soft skills, right? So any role, virtually any role you're going to come across, you're going to have to talk to people in one way, shape, or form, right? Very few roles are going to be you are just sitting in a box by yourself doing nothing. So we got to talk about how we interact with other people and how we put those soft skills into play. So again, she's a technical specialist, right? And also, too, we're talking about quality, stuff like that. And she's been on customer service. Imagine she's a very engaging person, has to articulate things clearly. So let's say clear and engaging communicator. Skilled at... So again, what can we pull from customer service? You're going to deal with a lot of different personalities. Sometimes people are going to be at their best, their worst, so that's going to take emotional intelligence. Oh, skilled at applying, verb there. Emotional intelligence. What else? So again, going back to the collaboration, the cross-functional bit, relationship. Success applying emotional intelligence, relationship building skills, and detail-oriented approach while translating complex technical concepts into easily understood information. So that's something that can be very coveted in the job market when you've got somebody who knows how to take something really dense, complex, make it easy for anybody to digest, understand, and then use that information, especially if we're talking about things in data, or if you're a salesperson and you're selling some type of enterprise software, things like that. Really, really important to be able to define yourself as that. So never a bad idea to do so. Right. And then what I'm going to do for this last one is, to save us some time, I have some custom-built GPTs that I've trained on basically the thousands of resumes I've written over the years, and got it down to a formula. So I can plug it into my app here, and it's going to put together a few bits for us. Now, I'm not super in love with it. I'll show you what it spit out and then how we're going to fix it. So, analyst, not so much, and we've already said detail-oriented. So, again, going back to her working across different departments, cross-functionally, stuff like that. So I might say dependable, collaborator, and trusted. There we go. Collaborative team player focused on streamlining internal system. Yep. Mentoring colleagues. Always good to be able to talk about yourself as somebody who knows how to coach, mentor, develop junior professionals. When companies are looking at hiring people, they're not just looking at, okay, what are you going to do? Especially if you're in a leadership position, it's going to be, how are you going to fit into the culture? How can you help us retain talent? Because you ask anybody who hires, turnover is such a headache. It's expensive, it's annoying, all different things. So whenever we can talk about ourselves as somebody who knows how to share knowledge, build environments that make good people want to stay around, that's very value driven. A lot of dollars and cents behind that, so never a bad idea to have. So let's see, optimizing quality management efforts to support long-term goals and research benchmarks. Perfect, that works. Okay, so, and again, assuming that this person is going to be targeting quality roles, right, we're going to use the areas of expertise to include relevant keywords and phrases. So things that she's probably going to be responsible for: project management. It's a dumb thing, but a lot of people get held up on that word project management, and they think, oh, well, I've never been a project manager, I can't include that on my resume. If you have run projects, whether they were small, whether they were large, where you had to deal with different stakeholders, you had to plan it, scope it, get it over the finish line, you can call yourself a project manager. We can't sit there and say that, hey, I have been in that job for 15 years, but we can say we have led projects. So just a little rant I like to go on when it comes to that kind of stuff. Let's see, quality assurance, no brainer. Actually, you know what, I'll probably move. So she's been in leadership positions, so I'm happy talking about team leadership. Business process education, that can come up. And again, we would adjust this depending on the roles that we're going for. Let's stick with healthcare and quality, so that's going to be patient safety. What else can we play with? So, stakeholder engagement. Cross-team collaboration. Two more. Technical writing. That can be a big part of it. Software data. Okay, so data analysis and management. Perfect. Cool. So far so good. So the way I structure the document, right, is like we said, I want summary up top, areas of expertise to include relevant keywords, and then I like having a notable achievement section. Reason I want to have that is because according to heat map studies, most people read a resume in the shape of a letter F. Right? They go down and across and across and spend a majority of their time in the middle of page one. So I want to get the most relevant achievements up front and center. Typically what we want to do is look at a job description and see if we can figure out what are the 2 or 3 or 4 main problems that we'd be solving at that company. And if I've got an achievement that shows I've solved the same or a similar problem, I want to get it in this section. It's the most likely place the reader's going to find it. So as you can see here, I've highlighted the 3 that I'm going to go ahead and use. So what I'm going to do is plug these into my nifty GPT. So again, ChatGPT would not be able to write this on its own. It can get close sometimes, but the way mine work is that I specifically trained it on data from resumes I know got people jobs and interviews. And basically what we did was figured out the pattern behind everything and almost set it up like a mathematical equation where it just plugs in the way I would typically do it. And let's see. So for notable achievements, we want to make sure we include the company name. Otherwise, the reader may not know what they correspond to. perfect. No. Sorry, I just got a request to kill the music. I hate working in silence, but it is what it is. I'm usually listening to lo-fi beats. Occasionally I'll throw on some So Distilled, stuff like that. Okay, cool. So let's get back into it here. So supported, documentation initiatives. Supported sounds a bit weak, so I'm going to make that say made critical contributions towards driving documentation initiatives. Now, big difference between to and that, or to and which. To means maybe it happened, right? I did this to get this result. I don't know if that happened or not. I want to say I did this, which resulted in that, right? So that met FDA submission timelines. Now, much more impactful that way. Now it shows like we're getting something done, not just, hey, this was my responsibility. This is something that I accomplished. Next one. So let's change that to technical support, a medtech company through staffing placement. Yeah, perfect. Again, showing that cause and effect. And then what's our last one? So reason I picked these, obvious one, driving documentation initiatives, ensuring regulatory compliance. That's going to be a big thing for anything in quality. Same thing too, there's going to be certain aspects of trying to come up with solutions for quality issues, troubleshooting. So that's why I wanted to include this one for when she was at the staffing firm doing the customer service gig for the diabetes product. And then the last one was at the video game organization. This is more about, showing organization, finding ways to optimize the space, stuff like that. So that was the most transferable I could find that related itself to quality. So that gives us a good place to start. Now, again, we would move these around depending on the role, right? Doesn't mean these are set in stone. It just meant to give us a good place to start. So let's go back up, and now let's start building out these roles here. So I'll plug that in, and because we're not including personal information about the company name, blah, 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 we're going to leave those blank. Right. So I'm going to cut that because I've already used it. And what I'm going to do is, because these blue ones I'm going to use for achievements, and then I'm going to go back over to my GPT. Now, if anybody wants access to these GPTs, there's links to our Etsy store that has these templates that have access to them. Also, too, I've got a self-guided course if you wanted to check that out that has access to the GPTs as well. But yeah, let's go into it. So I need 3 sentences for this role. I usually like to keep it at around 40 to 55 words when I'm talking about the responsibilities. Actually, I didn't even explain that. So my approach when I develop a resume is I want a clear differentiation between our responsibilities and then what we accomplished on the job. So again, I'll use 40 to 55 words talking about your day-to-day, and then bullets, 25 to 35 words, where again, we say, I did this, which resulted in that, or here's the result, here's how we got there. So let's see, I need 3 sentences for this role. I'm gonna copy all that over. Hey, Kate, yeah, go for it. You can put your question in the chat. I'm happy to answer it. Okay, so this is what it gives us. So I can cut that to SLAs. Perfect. So the reason I cut that is a bit of a throwaway line. It chucked in there departmental collaboration. It's not going to be as important, but being able to say recorded and validated incoming data to ensure, yeah, perfect. So this gives us a good overview of her background. I mean, of her main responsibilities. Um, don't need to be anything more than that. Yeah, pretty solid, straightforward there. So now let's look at her accomplishments. So again, the goal is to show cause and effect, right? I did this, which resulted in that. So what we're gonna do, plug that in over there. Sorry, I see people are writing stuff in the chat, and admittedly, this is the first time I've done a live stream, so let's see. All right, here we go. Um, so yeah, so Kate, you can put your question in the chat whenever you like, and then Kaylee asks, should I submit a resume as a Word document or PDF? So it's going to depend. Whenever you're going through some type of applicant tracking system, whether it's Talio, Workday, or any of the proprietary ones that big tech firms have, you're going through some type of ATS that's looking to scan the resume, parse the information. It's looking to see how your job titles match up with the role you're going for. It's looking to see how much experience you have. And a Word document is the gold standard for the software being able to read it correctly, right? That's probably one of the biggest issues a lot of my clients run into when they're like, I've put out hundreds of applications and I'm not hearing anything. That tells me there's something off with the resume in one way, shape, or form. And oftentimes that comes down to formatting. So you have to be very careful with using text boxes. I usually recommend if you're doing this on your own, don't use a text box. It's just, you're asking for trouble. You want to make sure it's a very clear, easy to follow timeline. You want to mitigate things like overlapping, conflicting dates, showing yourself as a business owner, or showing too much experience, like over 20 years. And that just comes down to the unfortunate reality of age discrimination. It's wrong, it's illegal, but we know what happens, right? So, I make the dumb joke, we play the game with the rules they give us. So to answer your question, yes, we want to submit it online as a Word document. Now, if you are submitting the resume directly to somebody, like you're going to email it, share it via text, stuff like that, what I would want to do is make sure that I'm sending it as a PDF. That locks in the formatting and it gets us to what we need, or it looks the way it should. Let's see. Yeah, it can be good to have to now. Most applicant tracking systems, the way at least when I've had conversations with developers, it should still register the content, right? It's not going to necessarily associate it with a specific role. However, it can get tricky with some of the older ones sometimes. So I mean, you can play it safe and not have the notable achievement section, but as far as our success rate and what our clients have been able to achieve hasn't given us really any issues with applicant tracking systems. I mean, I'm not going to say that can't happen because obviously if it's happened to you, then that's unfortunate. But it's a good idea to include it just because at the end of the day, yes, I mean, a human is going to have to read the thing. There's a lot of chat about AI and it making decisions for hiring, stuff like that. That's not typically the case. At the end of the day, it's always going to be a human who decides who's getting the interview and who's getting the job. However, and something I'm happy to talk about later on, but more and more jobs are requiring that first round of interviews to be with a chatbot or an AI agent. And it's a bit bit eye-opening because it throws a lot of folks in a loop. However, we would approach it the same as any other interview. I just might speak a bit slower. I'm not going to use metaphors or things that might confuse it. And I'm still talking about achievements. I'm still talking about impact. So that's something that we're targeting here. So what I'm doing is just typing these in. So I like having a bolded out keyword under the key achievements within the experience, just because it allows me to direct the reader's attention to whatever I want them to focus on within the achievement, right? So resolved escalations consistently while delivering expert service. Cool. So this is what she did, and then this is the outcome: increased satisfaction and reinforced trust. Right now we can get rid of high impact. Perfect. And then risk management, enforcement, precision, short rates for applying to mitigating patient risk. Yep. Simple, easy, right? Cause and effect. That's the goal we want there. Working our way down. So this is where it can get a bit tricky because we're going to need to flesh this out a bit more. So another cool thing I taught my GPTs to do was to look up job descriptions and cross-reference with earlier resumes we've written so that I can pull content that way. Perfect. All right. So obviously I would double check with whomever I'm working with to ensure that, yeah, we're getting it right. However, I can look at it and be very confident that, yes, this is what that role does and what her main focus was on. So resolve diversity, response times. Yep, perfect. Okay, and then I'm going to build out this achievement here. So complaint documentation, issue resolve. Again, that's stuff that's going to be transferable within the quality world. So that's why we would want to pick it. Sorry, GPT's not behaving today. Kind of have to make it sing sometimes, get it the way you want it to. Quality documentation, perfect. Yep, perfect. So what's the outcome? Ensuring compliance and supporting continuous improvement in support operations. Good stuff there. How are we doing on time? 30 minutes, perfect. Right, so now we're dropping down here. So I haven't decided on that achievement, but I think what we'll do is that one. Plug it in there. So as customer service, she's going to be obviously managing the 40 plus calls. She's going to be answering questions and she's going to be logging the information, all that kind of stuff. And there we go. I'm starting every paragraph with a strong action verb, right? Pretty much throughout the whole document, I want it to be very action oriented. I always make sure we don't use any passive voice. It's a document that shows people are getting stuff done, right? That's the goal. That's what we want to get across. Let's see. Moving over here. And then across the board, I mean, it used to be the old saying was HR rules the world. Now it's data. Data rules the world, and then soon enough it'll be AI. But for now, when we can talk about ourselves as somebody who knows how to analyze, manage, report, visualize data, especially like white collar gigs, that's going to be something that is going to be valuable within the market, right? Somebody who knows how to Um, look at the numbers, translate them, give people actionable information, right? So let's see. Say data management. So she researched, reported, blah, blah, blah. What's the outcome? Ensuring excellent resolution, tracking, supporting quality assurance. Yep, perfect. And we're able to get quality assurance in there as well. Brilliant. Working our way down. Now, I'm going through this a lot quicker than I normally would just because I'm sure people don't want to hear me talk for 2-3 hours, and why would they? Um, However, we're just trying to speed run this thing a bit just to give, plenty of context on it. So let's see. We already, or no, that one's there, so we've already used that. Yep, I'm going to combine these two. Cool. So going back to what we did about the merchandising stuff at the video game one, same here with the entertainment company. We're going to use that too. A lot of organization, being strategic, stuff like that. So it makes sense to include. All right, so for something like this, I would probably go with business operations, just because this is a more kind of retail role. Now, these will work for now, but what I would probably do if we're targeting specifically a quality role is I wouldn't use things like merchandising, stuff like that, because that might skew it more towards marketing, retail, stuff like that, but we'll use it for now just for the sake of time. But again, the whole idea is to point the reader in the direction I want them to go. Like, this is what I want you to focus on. This is what I want you to focus on as you read the achievement. The important thing to remember, people spend 7 to 13 seconds reviewing these things. You just have a split second per each line basically within the document. So we got to be very concise, very punchy, plenty of white space in between the lines. I think I've got at least 2 points of space. Yep. In between everything, 12 points in between. There's something about the uniformity of the document that can make a big difference. I mean, people like seeing nice, neat, orderly things. When we have a professional looking document that again is balanced, plenty of white space, it already tells the story about who you are as a professional, and that's what we want to get across, that you are the right person to hire. Let's see. Yeah, Hunter.io has not been performing well, unfortunately. And then the other one I like to use, Clearbit, that just got folded into HubSpot. Sorry, I'm answering a question in the chat. Rocket Reach is probably my preferred right now. That's probably the best for getting the most accurate email address. I believe they have a free version of it. You don't need to do like the paid version, stuff like that. And when it comes to messaging recruiters, headhunters, hiring managers directly, at least in my professional experience, email is always more effective. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I go on LinkedIn, I usually start my day with about 5 to 10 messages of people trying to sell me stuff, which I get it, it's the hustle. But sometimes that pushes down messages from, my clients, other people, friends I want to talk to, stuff like that. So some of the feedback I've been getting from my network of recruiters, headhunters, hiring managers, all those folks, is that they don't even really pay attention to LinkedIn messages anymore, just because it's so spammy and it's very easy to just ping it. Whereas email, you got to work for it a bit, right? And while people may not check their email addresses, may not check their LinkedIn messages every day or even once a month, everybody checks email typically at least once a day. So if you're trying to get in touch with somebody directly, always a good idea, because if anybody's been in the job market, they're aware the hiring process is very impersonal. right? Between having to interview with AI agents, going through applicant tracking systems, one click apply on LinkedIn. The human element has really shifted away, right? And what you're seeing is people want that back. There's something to be said about developing interpersonal relationships, you know, getting to know somebody, share a laugh, find common ground. One of the happiest hunting grounds for finding new opportunities are in-person events. So like workshops, roundtables, conferences, um, somebody you can sit down, have a coffee with, right? You bump into them at a workshop, whatever. When we can make this process personal, when we can make it so we're more than just a name on a computer screen, that's what's getting people over the finish line. Not just sending out 100 resumes every week and hoping for the best. Right, so let's go back to our resume here. So deliver service is clientele. Yeah, perfect. Yep, straightforward there. Now, what I would probably consider doing again, if we're targeting strictly a quality role, I would probably do something like this. So I would call this additional experience, and I would cut content there. Why is that off? Let's make that 12. Perfect. So that's there. Bang. That's there. Bang. And then let's say there was something in the regional surgery center role that I wanted to get in there, like insurance verification. I could then make an achievement, move it up here for that specific role, right? So I'm not necessarily going into full detail, but I can still talk about experience up front and center that I wasn't necessarily able to do because it's on page 2. If that makes sense. It probably doesn't, but let's roll with it. Point being is that we can be creative with how we manage the applicant tracking system, right? Again, the hiring manager doesn't need to know everything. They just need to know the stuff that's most relevant for them, right? And if you have experience that is earlier in your career and you have over 20 plus years of experience, having an additional experience section and perhaps removing the dates if it's going back into the early aughts or the 90s, and then mentioning an achievement from that work up here, perfectly fine, right? That's one of those ways we can kind of get around dealing with issues related to age discrimination, excuse me. And also too, again, getting it on the front page, just because, again, with the 7 and 13 second window, people just fly through these things. So they spend a majority of their time on page 1. So when we can get the most relevant stuff up front and center, that's the ticket. Right. So let's put this back the way it was. Excellent. And I won't go into full there, but what you can see here is that we've got our education. So up top here, she's mentioning she's currently working on the quality management certification. So let's say I wanted to get that more prevalent, right? That I'm somebody who's focused on professional development, stuff like that. And I want to get that achievement up front, or get that, the fact that I'm working towards that qualification. I can do this. So like, for example, one of my clients, she got her accounting qualification in a different country to where she's living now. So what we did was use the professional development she's done to show that, hey, what I've done in this country is at the same level as this country. Now, with accounting stuff, sometimes they can be really strict on it. However, in this situation for this individual, I could write something like currently pursuing management, which will, so I don't want to say to, because maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but if I say this will happen, enhance expertise in quality systems, continue improvement, blah, blah, blah. Now, if we get something like that, I might just squeeze the space in between. No, let's squeeze that a little more. No. So these are just a little editing tricks you can do, and then that gets us back up. Perfect. Oh, real quick, never put unless it's like on the back page. As long as you've got it on the front, it's fine. But I would never put this information in the header. Applicant tracking systems can't typically read that information. So you're not going to have a name, a location, phone number on it. Now, if they actually open up the resume, yes, they'll see all that stuff. But um, best to just, you know, not venture into that area where it's like, oh, it could be an issue. Um, but yeah, as far as education, stuff like that. So for somebody with 15 plus years experience, don't need to necessarily show the GPA. I could still say summa cum laude, perfectly fine. If it's a degree or certification that we're currently working on, we put in progress. You can put the graduation date afterwards. Um, you don't need, again, I'm not the end all be all. I can only go on what my network has kept me informed about over the years. But you don't need to include dates for your graduation, right? It's technically protected data, and companies don't want to have to deal with protected data. So leaving that off is perfectly fine. Now, if you're fresh out of college or within like the last 10 years, it's fine if you want to include it. We only really need GPA if you're going into academia or you don't have a lot of other achievements that you can talk about and we need to focus on academic ones. That's perfectly fine too. Um, but yeah, for this situation, we don't need the GPA and we don't need the dates, just the degree, what you did it in. Um, and then if we wanted to add a section of like technical skills, stuff like that, what I would do is it would look something like this. Unless you are fresh out of college or you haven't had that first real grown-up job, technical skills education, we typically want to push that back towards the end of page 2, just because hiring managers are going to be so much more focused on what you delivered, what you accomplished with the knowledge and information you have. The degree, okay, great, you have it. It's usually a checkbox situation, unless it's an academic role. However, for most people, they're so much more focused on, okay, how are you going to make me money, save me money, build better relationships with my clients, serve the community better, whatever. We want to make sure that we're getting that across. So I would do something like this. And I'm just making this up right now. And that's how it would look like if I was just including technical skills, stuff like that. Little different story for like software engineers, stuff like that, because we might need to be a bit more extensive with like talking about programming languages, servers you're aware of, different software tools, stuff like that. But we will save that for another episode. So anyway, I hope folks found this helpful today. Let's see. I got a couple more questions. Is it worth applying for a role via LinkedIn or after seeing on the role LinkedIn? Yeah, I would almost always recommend going to the company's website. The less things that are in between you and the organization you want to connect with, the better. Now, LinkedIn's one of the safer ones. I won't name specifics, but others kind of have a mixed bag. So whenever you have the opportunity to apply directly on the company's website, almost always do it. That is the safest way. I shouldn't say almost always do it. I just don't like speaking in absolutes because only the Sith do that. And if you couldn't see from behind me, I'm a pretty big science fiction nerd. So this is question more ones for the resumes completing later. The amount of time is reasonable for sending a thank you note. Oh, great question. Couple things there. So wait 24 hours to send the thank you note. We never want to come off as desperate, right? Always make the dumb joke. Finding a job is like dating. You can't come on too hard, can't come on too soft. We find that middle ground between showing interest but not coming off as desperate. So within that thank you note, 24 hours, keep it short, sweet, to the point. Hey, appreciated our conversation. Really enjoyed talking about blah, blah, blah. If you really want to reinforce one more thing about value that you've delivered, that's great. Then get in, get out. Email's perfectly fine, but I can tell you I've had something like a dozen clients over the years, and this is a testament to my dad, who would always say, if you really want something to be official, you send it by registered mail. The person has to sign for it. You get an alert that they've received it. It's the most official way to ensure somebody has a document in their hand. So I started advising clients to do that. And I swear it's 12 out of 12 all got the job offers. Now, that probably wasn't the only reason why. I know it wasn't the only reason why. However, there is something to be said about a physical letter that you get and you sign for. I mean, when's the last time that's happened to you? Right? When we get mail, it's junk, it's bills, it's a bunch of crap we don't need, right? Whereas I get a letter from somebody, especially if it's handwritten and very professional looking, paper, that says something about yourself. That really does leave that positive, lasting impression. And it shows you're a professional and it shows you care, right? So, not always going to be, something you can do every time, um, especially if it's a fully remote company, stuff like that, and they don't have offices. But if you went into a physical location, had a great final round interview, I would always recommend send that thank you note, registered mail. It really does leave an impression. And so far, for folks that I've had do it, we've got pretty solid success rate. Last question for the day. How do I decide what should go in the notable achievements section? Oh, as opposed to in the relevant role. So whenever I want to do notable achievement sections, I want to lead off with the highlight reel, right? What are my most impressive achievements? What are the things that are going to capture the attention the most? When I get specific into a role, what I want to do is look at the job description and see if I can determine what are the 2 or 3 or 4 main problems that we'd be solving at that company. And if I have an achievement that shows I've solved the same or a similar problem, I got to get it in that section, right? Because what we're saying is, I see what problems you have. I have solved them here. I can do them for you at your company, and here is the evidence to show that. Um, we always want to veer away from theory. I don't want to say, this is what I would do. I want to say, this is what I have done, and this is how it ties into your needs. Uh, the more you can get focused on playing to what that hiring manager wants and making sure that person knows that you're going to solve their problems, make their life easier, that's the ticket, right? So, right. I'm going to go inside and play with my 7-month-old baby. I hope this was helpful for everybody today. And if you've got any questions, feel free to shoot us a message over LinkedIn or YouTube. You can, our email address is info@canarycareers.co.uk. Always happy to answer ad hoc questions, career advice, resume stuff, and try to make connections where we can to help with referrals, things like that.